Since the first hours of the full-scale invasion, I looked for the opportunity to come to Ukraine. I take part in this war because I believe that taking part in this war contributes to the revolution's emergence in Russia. The attack of Russia on Ukraine is a revolutionary struggle in a new context. Shrapnel was taken out of my leg, as far as I know. I still have it in my chest. My name is Alexey Makarov. I am an anarchist, and I take part in Ukrainian armed resistance against Putin's aggression. I am currently part of a new unit, Sibir Battalion, created recently. I'm a machine gunner in the assault unit. I have Russian citizenship and refugee status with a permanent resident permit in Sweden, where I've lived since 2011. Let's start with the beginning. Where were you born and raised? I was born and raised in Moscow in 1988. I loved history, and I chose to study humanities. I participated in Olympiads and won a few prizes. History was and still is my special interest. I must say, I got involved in a radical leftist political movement quite early. This is when I joined the vanguard of Red Youth, which was a leftist youth group. It included everyone from old-school communists to Trotskyists and the New Left, followers of all those leftist schools of the 60s and 70s. It was quite a crowd of interesting people, many of whom are my friends and now work on different projects. We blocked the Ministry of Education. I remember we used to lock on tactics and fought with the police. It was then militia on demonstrations. We were going to all the cities of Podmoskovia to join seniors' protests, blocking streets during these protests against so-called pension reform in 2005. It was a more lively Russian society back then. We went to block streets and freeways, marching before them to push militia and OMON cordons. Were you involved in NBP? I joined NBP in 2005. It was one of the most prominent opposition groups that initiated many rallies and demonstrations. A lot of people went to jail for that. At the time, I felt like I needed to be in the movement that radically opposed Putin's regime. Back then, NBP was the choice. Plus, NBP had a democratic program. They argued for democratic changes and social issues. It was the reason why I was interested in it. Was it your main activity, or was it actionism? Well, I had different side gigs, but I also studied. I enrolled in the history faculty of MGU, and I was a student there for a year, until they put me behind bars. Tell us more about it. Well, they locked me up for fighting the movement Mestnie Locals in 2006. It was kind of a pro-Kremlin youth movement. We had a confrontation, which they started, and we had several people put in jail. Besides me, they arrested now famous journalist Roman Popkov and 5 other people. We got a 2-year sentence. We kind of spent all this time in custody anyway. The court case was slow. They had a final decision by spring of 2008, and summer of 2008 was the end of my sentence. I was just 18 years old. Everything seemed fascinating to me. I participated in radical politics and got arrested and imprisoned. It was kind of logical for a revolutionary at the time, at least. I thought so. I was behind bars, and the jail was like any other jail out there. In Butyrka, they put more than 60 people in a cell designed for 22. I was also put in a special one, the cell of 4 or 6 people. They added to my file a streak, disorganization tendency, because they thought I was responsible for a revolt. Were you? Well, it depends, because the administration was trying to toughen the rules in 2008, and I was a so-called road warrior. My job was to send malyava, or notes, to other inmates down the road in other cells. The warden saw me doing it. My mailing services and the communication between inmates in different cells was forbidden. They went to my cell and dragged me out to a long corridor, the so-called prodol, and tried to beat me up with batons. I started to shout so as many inmates would hear me that wardens were going rogue. Everyone started hitting the cell bars, causing a lot of noise. The usual prison riot. They said I initiated it, and I got 15 days of solitary confinement. Yeah, and I got a streak to my file, disorganized tendency, and I was put in solitary confinement cell. My parents never approved of my political work. They, of course, thought I was kind of a troubled kid. Something like that. Yeah, a problem child. Are you staying in touch with your parents? Now I do, yeah. I have a sister and we talk occasionally, but we stay in touch. My father died and I don't speak with my mom. I don't know, I was just convinced the world is unfair and you should do something about it. I still do. I never changed. I still think the world is unfair and someone has to do something about it. NBP was declared an extremist organization and they filed an extremism case against me while I was in prison, so I couldn't attend the hearing. Yeah, while they declared NBP extremist organization, I was in prison and they just went to search. Did they search your house? Yes, there was tremendous pressure. The case regarding extremism was filed, and I realized I would go to jail again. I went to Ukraine in January 2009. Why Ukraine? Do you have any connections? It was the closest country, but I was kind of curious, in a way, about Ukraine. I visited it when I was young. I got connected with political movements quite fast. There was a protest campaign, Get Usich, against everyone, at Maidan at that moment. I participated there, and there were Bratstvo, Brotherhood members. You could just come to the Maidan and meet with people. Brotherhood is the organization led by Dmitro Korchinsky. Maybe Brotherhood members wouldn't share my opinion. I don't want to put words in their mouths. But at some point, they had the idea that the Brotherhood was Ukrainian NBP. In some way, they tried to copy the aesthetic ideas. My first acquaintance from the Brotherhood was now a commander of one of the special units that fight in the Kherson region. I just said, like, I came from Russia, I am a former political prisoner. They were so welcoming and warm. I hung out in tents with Brotherhood members for some time. We spoke a lot. In April 2010, someone attacked the ATV channel office. It was quite a popular channel in Odessa owned by Ihor Markov, quite an odious pro-Russian politician. Now he escapes to Russia, even allegedly fights against Ukraine. Then he was living in Ukraine, Odessa, had his TV channel, and he was attacked in his own office. I didn't take part in it, really. But since I was already under the repressive justice system, watch and it never leaves you alive. I was. Was it during Yanukovych's presidency? Yeah, Yanukovych was president then. When I tried to leave Odessa, I was arrested and incarcerated. I was sentenced to a year, 2 months, and 14 days overall. I spent the whole term in custody because I was tried before June 2011. Did the Russian, Moscow, and Odessa jails differ? There's no drastic difference in general. I think it was easier and less harsh in Odessa. I never was put in solitary confinement in Odessa, yeah. Basically, it was so-called Soviet jail, a black jail, just like Butyrka, which followed the prison code. I returned to a more or less familiar environment, so to speak. Were you the only one who got arrested? No, another member of the Brotherhood was also arrested, but he got different charges. But why did they choose you? Why were you arrested and sentenced? If you haven't taken part in it, they should have known that. You had a track record with the justice system in Russia, but not Ukraine. Yeah, listen, I had a track record in Russia, but by that time, I also had a track record in Ukraine. Maybe it wasn't as striking, but it existed for sure. So there was the organization Autonomous Action, And we were doing, I think, quite sharp demonstrations. You know the famous campaign when Kyiv City Council was pelted with smoke bombs? Yeah, I was there. We did it together with the Resistance Committee, also known as Black Headquarters Organization. So the leader of this organization was my unit commander in the OUN battalion when I joined the army here. Were you released in 2011? Yes, and they tried to extradite me to Russia, but the human rights defenders intervened. It was on the level of the UN Refugee Agency. They sent me to Sweden as a refugee and have lived there since 2011. What would happen if you got extradited to Russia? Do they still have extremism charges pressed against you? Yes. The thing, there was an adaptation and integration period in Sweden. It happened quickly and painlessly for me. I quickly learned the language. I didn't have any issues to find a job. What jobs did you have? I worked as a postman and loader in an information center, in different positions. I live in a small city, Vimmerby. The city is famous for Astrid Lindgren living there, a famous writer who created Carlsen and many other children's books. When Euromaidan started, I was in Sweden. When it reached its peak, I was in custody in Hamburg. There was a demonstration of leftist anarchists in late December 2013 against the closure of a famous squat rote flora in Hamburg. They wanted to close it, which caused a huge demonstration with riots. Me and my Swedish friends participated in it. We were arrested, and I was on the international wanted list of Russia. I was in custody for 1.5 months until they clarified the situation and released me. And when were you released, when Maidan won? I was released a bit before it happened. The moments before, I believe it was the day before, and February 18th was the day of the largest unrest, with the most tragic casualties there. Maidan, anyway, won, regardless of the tragedy. What year did you come back to Ukraine after Maidan? Just after February 24th, yeah. Only 2022, so you lived in Sweden for 10 years. So the war started. Where have you been at that moment? To be honest, I didn't believe that the full-scale invasion would happen. The atmosphere was so anxiety-inducing that I just checked the news constantly. I really thought Putin was trying to bargain some benefits with the West. I didn't believe that he would order the full-scale invasion. Anyways, he started it. I was in Sweden when everything started. Since the first hours of the invasion, I have been looking for the possibility of going to Ukraine. You didn't have any previous combat experience? No, but I had a good and still have a good physical state. I practiced sports for a long time, almost my whole life, but I didn't have combat experience. My anarchist anti-fascist friends in Ukraine, including Dima Petrov, was one of the organizers of the project. In March, he created an anti-authoritarian unit as part of Kyiv Territorial Defense. My first thought was to join this unit. In March, they still had the opportunity to call for people from abroad, and some foreign friends came here. I mean, I had this thought because it was an awesome achievement of my friends, foremost Dima Petrov, who organized it all. I mean, specifically the unit of leftist anarchists. But while I was preparing documents and had received approval to arrive, they didn't have such an opportunity anymore. I was in touch with Dima, Lishi, who helped with my entry permission. In the end, I managed to arrive in June with the help of Ilya Ponomaryov and his unit. Were Ukrainian border guards suspicious of you? Did they think you're Russian? I don't know. I had a letter that proved my intentions saying I'm normal, and they didn't have any objections. They said, all right, you're okay. I always had a thought to create a leftist anarchist unit, and Dima worked on it a lot. I tried to help as much as I could, but it wasn't easy, unfortunately. We looked for a lot of units, and many had contracts, and many set meetings and negotiations. Everything resolved with us, me and Dima, joining the 95th Separate Polesian Air Assault Brigade. because one of my old friends from Black Headquarters was a commander there. He said, I can't guarantee you an official listing in the brigade because you're foreigners, but you can come here. You can be military volunteers. You'll have a military volunteer contract and you can participate in military operations. We kind of had one goal, to join the war. We wanted to join the war and declare that we, anarchists, also fight, and potentially we could invite other people to the unit. We wanted to work on this anarchist collective within the brigade. Did you have any training, or were you sent to the front line right away? We had training near the front line. When did you fire a gun for the first time? The first time I fired a gun was in August during training. I shot enemies in autumn. It was an assault operation. We went from south of Slavyansk. No, Donetsk or Luhansk region. I'm not sure. It was when we had an operation in Liman. How did 6 months change you? Did you see any changes in your beliefs? We discussed it with Dima Petrov many times. Dima had a theory that if a person knows the reason they're fighting, if they are loyal to their principles and ideas, the war doesn't change the person. Dima met with partisans of the Working Party of Kurdistan, the people who had been fighting since the 1980s. He said, they are normal people. They don't have any brokenness in them, no signs of PTSD. It's just people who can talk with you and share their thoughts. We had this idea. I wanted it. But you couldn't? We couldn't. Dima wanted to create a new project, but it ended with his and his comrades in arms' death. Dima died, and it was obvious his ideas should be followed. His idea was to create an anarchist unit in Ukraine and share anarchist ideas in the context of war. My old friend wrote to me and said, Denis Sokolov wants to talk to you. I was like, who's that? He said it's a person who works with RDK, Russian Volunteer Corps. In addition to the RDK, they want to create another unit called Sibir Battalion, and maybe it will be possible to invite people with leftist views there. I thought that it was the opportunity Dima gave his life for, and I will continue to participate. I came back to Ukraine. I am here now. You're training in the forests, and a week or two you'll go to the front line as a unit. I hope we do. We waited for so long, it feels like the time has come. Again, it's not psychologically hard for me. Therefore, I better be at the front line than wait again. I take part in this war because I believe that taking part in this war contributes to the revolution's emergence in Russia and the opportunity to realize our social project. Sorry if it sounds generic. What scenario do you think is the best? The best scenario I see is Ukrainian victory, of course, the emergence of revolution in Russia, where anarchists could take part as an organized subject and achieve our goals. Achieving goals means units of anarchists are overthrowing Putin. Anarchist units are overthrowing Putin and working on creating a society based on principles, or at least actively pushing society into organizing according to the self-governance principles, social justice principles, and environment protection principles. It should be the destruction of the police system. If I were realistic, of course, we wouldn't succeed with everything all at once. But at least we could become stronger and evolve into a serious subject that can claim the agenda formation. In post-Putin Russia, realistically, we don't know what will happen. We only know what we can do to make it a reality. I can say that for sure. Yeah, I stay in touch with some friends in Russia who are doing revolutionary work. Is it the Combat Organization of Anarcho-Communists? Yeah, the Combat Organization of Anarcho-Communists. I have contact with different people. There's a myth, or maybe a reality. There are partisans. Then there we have an obvious work of Ukrainian special forces on Russian territory. How are these two things different? Again, if you just read the news, it's hard to understand. Does partisan movement really exist in Russia? I'm not sure how fair the term partisan movement is. I can't say it's a mass occurrence, but it exists. It became more active now than it was in a few years before the full-scale invasion. I definitely know that there are people who are unsatisfied and said they turned to radical actions. At the same time, if we look at the partisan activities, member statistics, people who get arrested are those who acted in the heat of the moment. Yeah, so it can be a person who read the news, felt powerful emotions, and went to set a fire. That's why so many of them get arrested, because they don't have any training or any special skills. If talking about COAC, it was an organized partisan movement example, and it still is. Some partisans connect their actions with revolutionary change strategies and anarchist goals they're trying to achieve. I think we'll have a revolutionary struggle anyway. But the war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, provides us with a new context to the revolutionary struggle. Right now, we are leading our revolutionary struggle in these circumstances, in this context of the war. We're looking for new ways of organizing, including participating in Ukrainian armed resistance. I believe hope and am ready to bring the victory closer with my own hands. The victory of Ukrainian resistance will bring the Russian revolutionary struggle closer. Right now, it's the main strategy and tactics. If the circumstances change, we will continue our revolutionary struggle against Putinism anyway. So 3 months passed since our last conversation in the forest. What were you doing? These 3 months were quite productive, in a way that we had training, we were on training grounds, and we had the first operation where I got injured. I'm now undergoing treatment in the hospital. We participated in an assault operation in Avdiivka direction. It was a series of assault operations, and we had several targets we had to achieve to complete the mission. During the operation, we had several losses. Several people in our unit were injured, myself included. How did you get injured? We went to the enemy's positions we had to capture. They continuously tried to repel the assault with their machine guns, and at some point they used UAVs with drop systems. I think they also used several FPV drones. They just started hitting us. There were explosions. I felt something hit my side, in the chest, a bit under my arms, and I couldn't breathe normally. At that moment, we decided to retreat. We started withdrawing, my group and adjusted groups, because the enemy used mortars. We reached our dugouts, and then I think a mortar shell hit us nearby. I got shrapnel in my right leg. The shrapnel was taken out of my leg, as far as I know. I still have it in my chest. Is it still inside you? So you will have it forever? Yeah, probably. War is war. Were you scared when you realized you were injured? No, I wasn't scared. I didn't feel any pain. When we got injuries, it was evident that we needed to retreat, so we retreated. Could you walk yourself? When I was hit in the chest, I walked myself with my machine gun and ammunition. But after a mass mortar shelling, I couldn't walk. Avdiivka for the last month or more is a focal point of the events that occur there. What is happening there? I was in the hospital with other severely injured soldiers, and I think the situation is hard in every direction. For the last months, Avdiivka direction was extremely hard, but I heard there are combats near Klishivka and other directions too. This is the war. The war with the empire prepared for such aggressive politics. The only thing left is to resist. I can walk now, and I think I will be discharged before New Year. There would be some rehabilitation period to return my legs to normal functioning, though. I think they'll discharge from the hospital before New Year. Who have you met in the hospital? Do you speak with other injured Ukrainian soldiers? Do they know you're Russian? How do they treat you? The Institute of Citizenship, in my opinion, as an anarchist, is an oppressive concept in itself. I think it's weird to have prejudices against someone because of their passport color.
Я считаю странным иметь предрассудки к личностям по тому, какого цвета у них паспорт. Ну, это такое, это общефилософское.
It is a philosophical position. Is the question of citizenship less acute question on the front line than it is for civilians?
Мне кажется, он гораздо менее остро стоит, чем где-то в тылу. То есть там вопрос в том...
There's a concept of understanding how to fight and how you can rely on them as your brothers in arms. I think it's the most important thing. The relationship with other injured soldiers and medical staff is normal. Haven't had any issues.
Обычное взаимодействие обычное человеческое взаимодействие.
Почему ты сейчас больше всего?
What do you miss the most?
Ой, я много...
Чего тебе не хватает? Расскажи.
Я не знаю, я считаю, что как революционер...
I don't know. I think as a revolutionary, I should perceive any hardships as it is calmly.
Мне не хватает...
I mean, I miss my future and anarcho-communism, like Mikhail Zlobitsky said. When I was in the hospital in the first week, I wanted to go to the shower because you don't have the opportunity when you can't walk. I wanted to go to the shower when I was in Dnipro and to brush my teeth. I thought it would be so awesome to brush my teeth. Well, it's hard when you're immobile. I did it anyways, without the water, with a wet wipe. Oh, how I miss brushing my teeth. These are my materialistic wishes.
Материалистических каких-то желаний.